Welcome to another week of Investors Gallery. My name is Presley. I am half of Dimensional Capital Partners. The other half is Melvin Fairby, who is also our securities attorney. We are a multifamily investment and development firm here in Houston, and we do all things multifamily. And I kind of say this every other week, but I mean it then, but I really mean it now. I have a very special guest. And the reason why this guest is special is because I think as soon as our social media paths crossed, we just started like vibing on the same frequency. She is amazing at social media. She is amazing at marketing. She does all the things that I try to teach other people to do. And I even look to see what she does myself to see if I can learn some things. But more importantly, she's in the real estate investing space. And I am honored to have you on, Nicole. Thank you for coming on to Investors Gallery. Oh, and also let me explain to the audience what this is, because I told you I was going to explain to you about the office. So for those who have not seen the podcast before, the video version, I built everything behind me, which is my office. It's about 500 square feet. It was all attic space. And on the other side is an art gallery. And I built that as well. So that's where we get Investors Gallery from, because we were supposed to be shooting in the art gallery. I just have never gotten over there in the 7 or 8 months that I've been doing this podcast, but one day I will. We did do a podcast in the actual art gallery in the north area of Houston, in the Woodlands area, for people who are familiar. So yeah, that's what my background is. I built all this. I didn't build the desk though. So thanks for Nicole. Explain what you do and give us some insight on all your genius marketing.
Sure. And so, firstly, thank you for inviting me and having me on your platform and your show. This is a great concept to have a live podcast like every week. That's kudos to you, man. I know how
Thanks.
difficult that is. And I think once you actually move into the art gallery you're supposed to be in, people are going to be like, nah, I think you should just keep this background because they're going to be confused. Like, I don't know what's going
Yeah.
on. Just why don't you just hang a picture or two in that background and just stay there? And then it's semi art
It'll work.
gallery esque.
It'll
Yeah,
work. Okay.
I think that'll
Proud of
work. Okay. So anyway, my name is Nicole Pendergrass. Thank you for all the compliments on my marketing. I'm definitely not a marketer. I do like aesthetics and design. So maybe that's where some of that comes into. It also takes me way too long to create social media graphics because I'm looking at every little aspect and I'm tweaking. I'm like, oh, maybe I should move this a centimeter to the right, or then I'm moving it back, and I'm just playing with it way too much. So it takes a little while. Social media is another full-time job if they don't tell you when you're trying to market and put yourself out there. But it has been extremely life-changing from when I started my journey. So just to start, I'm a multifamily investor. I have some commercial properties in Pennsylvania. Those are my primary joint venture properties. And I've also syndicated a couple of properties down in the Southeast, in Atlanta and South Carolina. And right now I'm looking to expand my portfolio, even with the craziness that's happening in the market and the rates being, what they are. So I'm looking at some other asset classes as well as some small multifamily, which I kind of coined microfamily, that 10 to 20 unit range. So I think that I'll get into that a little bit later, but so between that and some mobile home parks, that's what I'm looking to expand into this upcoming year. But I kind of started with a 3-family house hack. Like I moved into one of the units and rented out the other two. And that was my foray into really getting my very own first investment piece that I had to learn how to be the landlord. I had to learn tenant relations. I had to learn like how to manage contractors and get things fixed and repaired and deal with, non-payment and try to build rapport so that the tenants would pay. And, that didn't work for one of the tenants, but in any case, I did the best that I could. And from there, that I lived there as in a house hack for about 4 years. And that's when I got married. I I had my first child. So that's when a lot of life things were happening. And so I wasn't actively looking to grow my portfolio. I knew I always wanted to grow, but I just was trying to survive, right, with all the things that I was doing at that time. So 2019 is when I've intentionally decided to start growing my portfolio, to jump back into multifamily, like networking and going to events and meetups and RIAs and all those things I had been doing for years before. And I kind of stopped in that period of time that since I bought my 3 unit. So since decided to start scaling, I joined a mentorship program. I used my maternity leave to go visit a market that I had picked that was in Pennsylvania. It was close enough for me to get to and establish a presence like physically there because that was pre-COVID. And so things were still done like mainly in person. So I needed to get somewhere that I could get to. And because I have a W-2 and I have small kids and baby, like I couldn't just hop on a plane if a broker was to tell me, hey, I have this property if you want to come see it, but in a couple of days I'm going to list it. If I had that situation, I wouldn't have been able to act as quickly because I didn't have boots on the ground in those markets because I was still new and I hadn't expanded my network at that point. So that's how it started. And I basically 2020 was when the pandemic hit in March, right? And so that all of my work from my maternity leave, which was December 2021 or December 2019 to kind of January, February, as soon as I went back to work, the pandemic hit and I was like, oh, all my boots on the ground hustle that I did those last few months, it's like down the drain because like everything kind of went to a screeching halt. And that's when I joined my second mastermind because I said, you know what, I feel like I'm losing grasp of what I've already started building, even if it was a little bit. And so from there, that's when I was encouraged to start posting on social media. So it was like summer of 2020 is when I first started posting. And I kind of just jumped right in. I had no clue how much work social media really is. But doing that really opened up doors for a lot of opportunities, especially once I closed on my first commercial property, which summer 2020 was just like summer of networking and phone calls and Zoom. So I was bouncing from call to call to call, just on so many calls over the summer. I would talk to one person and they would say, hey, you need to speak to such and such over here. Oh, you need to speak to so-and-so, you need to speak. So I basically was just like playing not phone tag, but hot potato phone. I don't know what to call it. But I was doing that like all summer. And I eventually met someone who was in my same market. And we ended up having a few calls. We vibed together. And when a deal came available, he called me and said if I wanted to do it together with him. And so that's when I got my first deal done. And we just been rolling since then.
That's a lot to unpack.
I'm sorry.
No, that is normal. That is typically how 100% of my conversations go. And in that same vein, we've been thinking about doing a more live in person. I don't know if it would, I guess it'd still be a podcast because Zoom, sometimes the voice not overrides, but layers over each other. So it's difficult to have a back and forth. So I do like to let my my panelists or whoever I'm interviewing speak freely, and then I just, I'll ask whatever I need to ask at the end. So the original real estate, the first home that you got into, how accidental or purposeful was that? Did you get into this, hey, I'm a house hack and we're going to go from here? How did that thought process go?
It was very, very intentional. So I started studying real estate years before I bought that property in 2015. I found out about real estate as an avenue for regular people, that you didn't have to be a millionaire, own a business and all that to change your life with real estate. I found out about that in 2010. And so I had been going to all the meetups, all the 3-day conferences and boot camps. I joined the New York City RIA. There actually was a bunch of us in the New York City RIA who decided to get together and buy some properties in Detroit. We put like 5,000 in each, and we bought properties at a tax auction because Detroit was like where we could afford. And that did not turn out well because we didn't know really
That's my
anything
city.
about.
I know. I know the D. Yep.
We didn't know it. And that was the problem. And we didn't have boots on the ground. And we were trying to trust like the realtors and everyone else who had met on a property tour there. But it was still wasn't that same kind of connection to be able to, we couldn't really, they weren't part of the team. You know what I mean? So I
Detroit's
think
different.
that's, yeah, is you have to know block by block. And we saw that in person, but we just,
Yeah.
I don't know, we had hopium. So that I guess is all a learning lesson, right?
Yeah.
And so from there, one of the members of the RIA told me about a homeowner's grant because I didn't have any money saved. I was semi new out of college at that point. And I'm like, I live in New York City. It's expensive. I don't have the down payment for here, right? Even 3.5% is a lot, right? And so she told me about a homeowner's grant. We were going to give you $30,000. It was from Wells Fargo. I went and I got approved for the grant. I started looking, but because they approved me, they just gave me approval based on my income, which was for, of course, a single family. It wasn't based on the revenue coming in from a multi-unit. And so because it also had time limitations to the grant, I started looking at condos and things like that. And so even even with the condo, my mind was still in house hacking. I was like, okay, if I can only get a single family, I'm going to rent out the other bedrooms. And so I was looking at the layouts for that reason.
Mm.
So I was in contract with like two different condos and they both fell through. And by the time the second one fell through, I basically was going to run out of time for the grant and I wasn't able to use it. So I kind of lost the grant. So at that point, I actually was like, well, I mean, not that I wasn't upset because it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into trying to get those things to close. And it was months and months and months of back and forth. But I decided, you know what? I always wanted a multifamily. That's what I wanted. I was being forced into the single family route because of that grant. But at this time, I was like, I'm just going to start looking for it. And I'm going to send out mailers because I had learned that, all my years of studying and trying to wholesale and things like that. Actually, I never did a wholesale because it just was not my forte. But I learned how to do direct mailers and I sent some cards out 4th of July to some zip codes in the Bronx and looking for 3 and 4 family properties. And this was one of the properties who responded. And I ended up talking with him. And so I intentionally wanted to get, a multi-unit and live for free. So as long as the numbers let me, like for the rent from the other 2 units, let me live for free, that's what I wanted. And I needed to decrease my expenses drastically. And I knew that that was the next step, even if I didn't know what was going to happen after that.
Brilliant. How much would you say you have invested in yourself as far as education and mentorships and kind of everything that you've put into it?
With just with on the education side, and I just know in the last few years, maybe the last 2 to 3 years, it had to be like 25